Princess S. Do you? Why is the monster not restrained? Demanded a furry alien whose appearance reminded George of a lemur except with blue fur, probably because he's here of his own free will. And even if we wanted to restrain him, there's literally no restraint currently manufactured in the galaxy capable of holding him back. SUA. Replied crisply as she led George and the honor guard into the Galactic Council's meeting hall. George idly noted as he glanced around that it was quite similar in layout to every depiction he'd seen of the Yoon auditorium seating. A big podium on a stage in the middle, lots of aliens with various ceremonial-looking clothing, and little microphones that looked remarkably similar to the ones found on Earth. Meswera went up to a smaller podium facing the apparent leader of the council. Now then, you wanted to speak to me, Chancellor, still clad in her armor and being the third biggest species George could see in the room, aside from himself, fourth if he included himself. She looked quite imposing, and her expression clearly conveyed at least to George that she was already thoroughly sick of somebody's shit. A camera or something projected her image at colossal size for the entire council to see her clearly. Yes, your decision to bring fauna from a Class 6 death world to a SEPA, unleashing it right in the heart of the capital. While it did end well, with the creature forcing back what our estimates have determined to be nearly the entire Exertatenum army, is a grave violation of protocols and cannot be allowed to go unpunished. The limo-looking alien stopped short as George outright growled. A quick glance showed, that George's armor was faintly rattling from how hard he was shaking, and she didn't need to be able to detect his psionics to determine that he was a few more words from absolutely losing it. She spoke clearly. George, please calm down. Chancellor Hyph is just stating some protocols. George's helmet twisted to look at her and then jerked sharply before he turned back to the lemur-looking alien and crossed his arms. It wasn't lost on anyone that the Oxpacebian guards had taken a pointed step to get out of George's way if he decided to go after the Chancellor. Threatening their crown princess had clearly not endeared him to them. S smiled at Chancellor Hyph. Now then, please continue, Chancellor. Chancellor Hyph tried hard to force his fur back smooth from where it had stood on end. In terror, George's growl. T, that thing can understand us. Yes, S.A. Replied calmly. He is in fact quite clever. It was his quick thinking that prevented the Exertatenum from unleashing over 4,000 quantum collapse missiles on the galaxy a few hours ago. There was a moment of stunned silence and then someone declared, ridiculous. Turned to meet the four eyes of a slug-like alien. Everyone knows there's no way to disarm even one quantum collapse missile, let alone 4,000 of them. Even the Exertatenum wouldn't create so many of those horrible weapons. Ursi looked over her shoulder. Soupy, did you get the recordings from Eloclam's ship like I asked? One of the Exabaspian honor guard piped up immediately. Of course, Princess, as the guard hurried forward to link their personal digital device to whatever kind of projector the council used. I hear you. Turned back to the Chancellor. For the benefit of the council, I will now show you the security footage from the flagship of Exertatenum High Admiral Eloclam, who kidnapped me from Nixabus yesterday. Before anyone could protest, Soupy got the projector going, and it was as though the entire chamber and everyone in it disappeared, all of it replaced with the assembly chamber of Eloclam's ship, right as Uc was dragged in by Eloclam and his goons before the council's eyes. The entire thing that had started this story played out. From Eloclam's threats to George and AAC's conversation after calling Emi AAE his people to send a ship, then the revelation that his SEPA was under attack and George's immediate preparations to insert himself into the battle. When it was over, the projection faded, and George became acutely aware that by the smell of things, at least one delegate had been sick during the film. A quick glance revealed it to be the slug-looking alien whose front was now covered in faintly luminous yellow bile. A faint smirk crossed N. I. S face as she turned back to the Chancellor. "Are there any further questions, Chancellor?" The Chancellor twitched, and then, "You would protect this monster?" I snorted. "You have it quite wrong, Chancellor. He has protected all of us by hurling an entire galaxy's worth of the deadliest weapon in existence at his own homeworld." The Chancellor protested. "Such a horrible being cannot be permitted to live. He is a craven, honorless, mass-murdering monster." He said himself that he would not mourn the loss of his own homeworld and his entire species. He brutally slaughtered hundreds of sentients. Mercy and Misto considered that for a moment, and then, "George, would you explain to the council what you explained to me?" "My pleasure," George replied, trying hard not to snarl, after taking a second to settle his breathing. W stepped off the podium and gestured for him to take it. George stepped up to the podium, esteemed delegates of the civilized galaxy. "I am here not as a representative of my home planet, but as one of approximately 8 billion humans. My people are warriors at heart. I will not deny this. Yes, I shot over 4,000 missiles which would have eliminated my people in their entirety at them. Yes, I ended probably over 1,000 sentient lives today in brutal fashion and introduced a new technology which will force a drastic escalation in the civilized galaxy's combat technologies. I regret nothing." He paused, and as the delegates began to clamor, he cut them all off in a voice that easily overwhelmed all of theirs. "Now, let me tell you why." Silence reigned again, and George wondered if some of his psionic emissions might have leaked before continuing. "You all look at me right now, and you see a monster. A mass-killing, apex predator who can and will kill, not for food, but seemingly for amusement. You look at me after learning that I was willing to risk the destruction of my world, my family, my friends, and everyone I've ever known or cared for. What you don't see are the nearly 8 billion, no more like me, 8 billion sentients, who, if you gave them an option to face death themselves, or see trillions of innocent lives snuffed out, would not hesitate to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. We are 8 billion sentients who, one and all, would give everything we have to protect everyone else. When I launched those missiles, I did so certain that even if my gamble paid off, I had just committed suicide by the hands of the ex-Ertanen," George admitted, his voice, though quiet, still carrying easily through the silent chamber. "My people, if they knew that I had taken that chance, would beyond any shadow of a doubt kill me, even though if our positions were reversed, I feel certain that any of them would have been proud to have come up with a solution I did. If word of my actions ever gets out back home, I will not be able to go home." George let that hang in the air for a moment, gripping the podium and explaining as his head hung low. "Though my people are on an individual level kind, and every one of us willing to give everything for the sake of everyone. And Marseille, we are a species so cruel, selfish and destructive, that even the Exerim would not have dared to disturb us if they knew what we were capable of doing to each other. As individuals, we are good. As a whole, we are monsters who it would not be inaccurate to call war incarnate." The significance of the tears welling in his eyes would have been lost on the delegates of the galaxy, even if could see them as George continued. "For all that though, they are still my people. If my insane gamble failed, then I would have died knowing that the blood of my entire world, everyone I've ever known or cared for, might have cared for, was on my hands. The blood of my world." He clarified as he raised his gaze to meet those of the council, "and not a single one of yours." There was quite a bit of uncomfortable shuffling, and George gave his words a moment to sink in before continuing. "When the ex-Ertanen leader ordered me killed, and I discovered that their weapons were useless against me, I retaliated with every shred of force I could bring to bear for one simple purpose: to ensure that they would never threaten my home or yours or anyone else ever again. When I learned that the center of government for the entire galaxy was under attack by the same forces that had threatened my home, I asked Princess, to help me create this armor and bring me to the battle so that I could help. I had no need to do so. I could have returned home with the Accusations ship, and by the time they thought to turn their attention to my home again, my people would have a fleet capable of overrunning the galaxy with what I now know to be contemptuous ease. There was no hesitation in George's voice, not the slightest hint that his words could be anything but the truth. I did not, George continued, despite the fact that I would have been far safer returning to Earth and arming my people, alerting them to the presence of every other race in the galaxy and possibly gathering backup. I came to protect you because I knew that every second was another life lost. Everything I have done since my abduction by the Accusations has been to preserve the greatest number of lives possible from those who would see them brought to ruin. If that makes me a monster, so be it. I will take solace in the fact that you are all still alive to call me that. Another round of uncomfortable shuffling ensued, and George finished with, "If my presence is too disruptive for the galaxy, then I will happily return home and go back to living my life. If you are of the same mindset as Princess, and would have me stay to act as your shield, then I will help in any way I can. Be that against the Accusations or whatever else the universe may choose to send against our galaxy. If my help is unwanted, I shall not force it upon you. But whenever you all need me, I'll come as fast as I can and bring to bear every ounce of power I can to ensure the lives and liberty of not just my world, but any world and every world willing to call my people friends." He took a slightly deep breath and then called, "What say you delegates of the galaxy? Can we be friends?" Nature. When humanity made it to the stars 356 years later, they were surprised to meet one of their own. A man with hair long turned white wearing blue, a red cape, and the scars from dozens of battles across the galaxy, but still alive and kicking, the strongest and foremost hero in the galaxy, George Newton, who had come to be known as Superman.